What's going on, guys? We are back today with another video for you, and I want to do a top 10 list, essentially for beginners. We're going to do all non-limited legendary, or sorry, not legendary, non-limited cards. So we're going to show a lot of the good standard cards, or maybe some fusion ingredient cards that you want to be targeting if you don't already have them, because these are great cards for beginners. And I chose specifically most cards that can fit in just about any type of deck. So I didn't want to kind of pigeonhole myself for like a Birds deck or something like that. You know, I basically chose cards that you can slot in most cases in most decks. So that's kind of how, just kind of give a little forewarning there, because I know you guys are probably going to say, well, we could have included, Egyptian Nightjar, because that card's really good in the Birds deck. But it is specific to Birds, so I left it out for that reason. Also want to discuss, they announced today that there's going to be an upcoming balance update on December 11th, Monday. So I want to discuss potentially some nerfs that I think they're most likely going to hit. These are just obviously speculation. We don't know for sure what they're doing yet, but I am going to toss out a few ideas like I do, several of my other videos. Well, kind of targeting specific cards and what I think they're going to be doing. And to go with that, I like to usually toss out some buff ideas as well. So we'll touch on just a couple cards that I think would be neat buffs. And then I do want to discuss kind of along the same line as the buffs, but I've got a couple cards I want to showcase that I think would be good for a new archetype if they adjusted or balanced them out a little bit. And it's kind of a neat idea I want to kind of bring to the table. Maybe, you never know. Maybe they'll do it. Who knows? But all right, let's get started. So I got a top 10 list here, and I do have a couple honorable mentions. So let's go ahead and just start with the honorable mentions, kind of at the bottom of my list here. We're not going to use a filter, and we are going to go with the first card up that I think's a good beginner card is Fermi Paradox. Now, I like this card because big energy weeks. This gives you a chance to get some extra power on those cards if you build your deck around this. So, essentially, you're going to need, like I said, cards with 70 or more base power. And when you draw this card, they're going to get that nice 35 buff, which is huge and can really be impactful on a high energy week where, you've built a deck of big heavy hitters. So I think this card does have a lot of impact. I did a video on this card in the past for like a budget deck, and it really did a lot better than I expected. So I thought this was a pretty cool card. So that's the first honorable mention. It is a rare card. Next up, we're going to switch to the common slot. I know, right? The common slot. I still found a card I actually like. And this card is pretty good. I like this card for the debuff strategy, and I've used it in several decks, just actual, legit decks. I think this card is fairly decent for what it does. And it says, when played, all cards in both players' hands with 50 or more base power lose 30 this turn. So this card is debuffing your opponent potentially up to 90, which is quite strong. So I do like Scale Worm. I think it's good for a non-limited common card. I think it's very, very good for that slot. And the last honorable mention is going to be a legendary card. We're going to go Pumpkin Toadlet. When drawing your cards in hand with 3 or less base energy, gain 30 for 2 turns. So that ability right there is very strong if you build around it, do a little like a tiny type deck. For a beginner, I think this card can kind of shine in those type of decks. And then it does have the ability when played your amphibians in hand gain plus 10. We don't care about that as ability as much, but really that first part, that draw effect, your cards in hand under 3, get that nice 30 buff. That's quite strong. All right, we're going to start at number 10 here. Let's go to a card most of you have probably seen before, Flying Cloud. I like this card for the the rare slot here. For 5 energy, it's 0 when you play it, but typically you're going to have cards in your hand buffing it already, and then when returned, it's going to get that 100 permanent power. So as the game progresses, this card is going to be huge. If you play it twice, then on round 5, you get it again. This card can be, 200, 250 for only 5. Can definitely help you win a game late. So Flying Cloud, number 10. All right, let's go check out number 9 here. And we have Galapagos Tortoise. Only a 1-drop. This card's great in like another, again, like a little tiny deck, kind of like Pumpkin Toadlet. When drawn, if your deck has 6 or more life on land cards, your science cards, wherever they are, gain plus 13 until played. So I like the fact that it's wherever they are, so they don't have to be in your hand. And the stipulation's pretty easy to hit here. You just need, the 6 life on land cards. So you could do 6 life on land cards, 12 science cards, and this card could, for 1 energy be quite impactful. So I do like Galapagos Tortoise, and it's a non-limited card. So for the epic slot. Number 8, we are going again. I think this is again for a tiny build. Korean Turtle Ships. So when drawn, this card does lock for 2 turns, so it does have a downside. But in higher energy weeks, especially if you're rocking lower cards, it says when returned, your cards, wherever they are, with 3 or less base energy, gain 30 and cost plus 2 for 4 turns. So you get quite a bit there. 30 for 4 turns is quite a lot. And it's all your cards that are 3 or less base energy, so they don't have to be in your hand. They're just in your deck. Excuse me. So there's a lot to like here with this card. But again, it's a card that you need to have kind of built around. For a beginner, you got to have a lot of cards that cost 3 or less in your deck. And this card can shine. That is Korean Turtle Ships. Next on the list, jumping into, what is this, the number 7 slot? We are going with a card I really enjoy playing, and you don't see a card like this very often. A card that specifically targets your opponent's energy regen, and I like that idea. So this card, your opponent loses 1 energy regen permanently, and this is the only card in the game that does that, and it's coming in at the rare slot, non-limited. So I think that's kind of cool. Obviously taxing decks and, decks weeks that require, low energy. This comes into play really, really good. So definitely keep your eye on this archetype. It is good. You don't even have to build a complete archetype around it. Just this card in by itself can be pretty impactful, Downside, though, is that it's only 8 power, right? But it's specifically just targeting your opponent's energy more than anything. All right, next up, we are going with another debuff card I really like here, Power of Zero. When drawn, your opponent's cards in hand with 50 or more base power lose 49 power and cost -1 for 2 turns. So basically wiping out the power on your opponent's big heavy hitters. So pretty good. I like that for the debuff effect. I've seen this card hit entire hands before and just be completely backbreaking on the round. So definitely a decent card. All right, coming in at, what are we at, number 5? Coming in at number 5. Going with Francis Crick. I really like this card. I've played this card quite a bit, actually, just because I like it so much. There are specific weeks where the energy is not as impactful, so that loss of 1 energy really doesn't matter sometimes. I've seen, where you're going to get, let's say 20 energy no matter what. That's, the minimum. So if you play this card and you lose energy regen, who cares? You're still getting 20, right? So that can be really strong. And then in power per turn decks, that 16 permanent is quite a lot. So definitely a good card in Francis Crick if you are going for that power per turn. All right, next up we have another decent card. I've seen this slotted in a lot of decks. It is a bird card, so in the bird deck it is exceptionally strong. But even outside of the bird deck, this card does see play. Life on land decks love this card, so just overall this card is a really strong card. When played, your cards adjacent lose 30 this turn, and this card gains 60 perm. So as the game goes on, this card gets huge for only 5 energy. So Dracula Parrot coming in at number 4. Next up, coming in number 3 here, we've got a heavy hitter, Godzilla. This card is really strong, especially those high energy weeks. This gives you something to waste your energy on and get some big power for it. And it gets bigger as the game goes on. Again, you see the theme here with these cards that get that permanent power. That's what you want. These cards getting bigger and bigger. Just massive cards. So Godzilla, great for the space theme, especially built around Planet X, supermassive black hole. This card can be devastating. All right, coming in at number 2. Oop, why'd I type 2? I really like this card a lot. I feel like this card slept on a little bit. You don't see it very much, but man, just being able to hold this card all game and literally every turn, this card's just triggering your cards bigger and bigger and bigger. I love that. This card is great. And it feels great when you play it too. Like just all the permanent power you're raking in every turn is fantastic. So again, at the start of each turn, your cards in hand gain +3 permanent power. So and this card stacks itself. So this could be your late game play. You know, if you've been somehow buffing Dragon King up with other cards until played, and then this card's buffing itself permanently as the game goes on, and then this could be your round 5 finisher. Just boom, you're dropping, 250 power Dragon King, 300 power Dragon King down on the table. This card is great. I love it. And finally, most of you guys probably know what this last card is going to be because you haven't seen it yet, and I think for beginners, this card is a must-have, and it's fantastic. When I started, I played this card in almost every deck. I just liked it so much. I love the fact that you get the energy for it if you win. So that energy gain is very important, especially if you're playing like casual or weeks that need energy regen. This card is fantastic. And when played, your cards in hand get that +20 on the turn. So it's buffing, all the cards as well. I don't know. I just always love Martin Luther King in these decks. I don't know. Anyway, that's the list. Let's jump over. Like I said, we're going to discuss now some of the balance update that I think we're going to see. You guys know, you probably predict most of these cards I'm going to show because they are the cards that seem to be the issue cards lately that we're just sick of seeing. Almost every deck has them. So let's start off with the most obvious one here, Statue of Liberty. This card's just been kind of the new World Turtle since World Turtle got nerfed. It's kind of overtaken the meta. And, it's kind of making it to where most people want to slot this in. Even if you're not a complete 6/6/6 deck and you might just be like a 6/6, 2/4 or some weird kind of brew there, or 2/2/2. It feels like an auto-include most of the time just because it's so strong. So I really think they should probably nerf this card down a little bit. I don't think it's overpowered to the point where it's like 21's insane. But I think if you bring this 21 down to a +18 until played, I think that's probably more reasonable for this card just because it's so easy to toss into a deck and get so much value out of. So I'd say cut 21 until played down to 18. I think we'd be fine. All right, moving on. Let's jump to a card that's been just breaking the meta. You guys know Egypt is such a thing right now, and this card right here has a lot to do with it. So I would say, it says when returned, if your deck has 2 or more Egyptian mythology cards, your ancient Egypt cards, wherever they are, gain +26 and cost -1 permanently. So 26 to me is a little too much. I think we drop down to +20. I think that would be just fine. Even the -1 permanent power or the energy, I almost feel like we could just delete that right there completely. Egypt kind of gets a lot of discounts as is. I don't know that it needs more energy reduction. So I'd almost say just kill the energy reduction on this card and drop it down to +20. So basically just say wherever they are, gain +20 permanently. I think that's fine. I think that'd be a good nerf there. Next up, you guys know this card. This card's been also just lately just a complete auto-include in almost every deck, it seems like, that wants to do this kind of strategy, like a 6/6 Beowulf or a Statue of Liberty type build. It's so easy just to toss this in with, 2 Weird World, 2 Document, 2 Battle cards. There's your 6 history cards, and bada bing, bada boom. So I think this card needs to definitely be hit this patch. If they don't hit it, I'll be really surprised just because this card is kind of reshaped the entire meta. I would definitely drop it from +25 permanent down to +20. I think that's still extremely good and still very worthy of seeing play. But I think 25 is definitely a little too much. You guys see, I'm definitely targeting this Beowulf, Statue of Liberty, Folio type deck. It just seems very overpowered to me. And I think that's where they're going to go as well. Just kind of reshape the meta a little bit, most likely. Kind of touching in on that deck again. They might not even need to hit all these cards. Maybe if you hit one or two of these, it really just kind of cascades in general. But this card right here is really good. It's almost an auto-include again in almost every single deck. Because it's an epic too with Beowulf, it just makes it really strong. So definitely I would say this card needs to be cut down from +4 until played to +3. That gives, still gives a pretty good buff. The 30 on everything max is still pretty relevant for what this does. I think 40 is still way too much. That's what I would do with this. At least drop it down to +3. We can try it out there, see if it feels a little bit better in the game. Now, I don't want to just hit Bayo soul decks. I think we do need to touch on Vitruvian Consciousness. So Vitruvian costs more, so I think it's fine where it's at. But I do think between the two of them, given 36 until played, and it's so easy to build this 9/9 science, arts, and culture thing that everybody does. It's just such an easy deck to build that anytime you want to go that route, you can just toss those two cards in the deck, and it just makes it backbreaking. I think the 18, I think that between the two, 36, I think is too much. So if we drop this down from 18 to +14 until played, that gives your total back to +32 between the two cards. That's probably more reasonable for your entire deck, basically getting a buff of +32. So I would do that. I think nerfing Consciousness down because it's a 5 energy cost versus Vitruvian 6. I think it makes more sense to hit this one. So that's what I would do. I wouldn't touch both cards. Just Consciousness, bringing it down to +14 until played. I think it would still be an auto-include in the 9/9 deck, but definitely pull the power level down. And finally, I think this card has been plaguing the meta far too long now. And really, it's obviously in these high energy weeks. This card is an auto-include almost every single deck. Every time we're in a high energy week, something to burn up everybody's energy, and they get so much power out of it. 48 for 3 energy buff seems like a little too much in my opinion, especially, like I said, if we are in those high energy weeks. So I think pulling this back from 48 to 40 would be just fine. So on the round, that does shave off quite a bit. What is that? 8 per card. So for 3 cards, that's 24 per turn times 3. What are we looking at? 70, basically shaving 72 power off on the round. I think that's reasonable and still makes it definitely viable to play, to burn energy up. So that's what I would do. I'd shave it down to +40 from 48. All right, that's all I had for the nerfs. Let's go check out some buffs, and then I'll talk about the archetype that I want to kind of push into. I think would be a really neat archetype. I don't own this card, actually. Robin Hood. This card needs buff bad. I mean, your opponent's cards in hand with 80 or more base power lose 20 this turn. What? That is terrible. Who's playing cards 80 or more power? Hardly anybody. So I think this card needs to say 50 or more base power, and I don't know, 20 this turn doesn't even seem like enough in my opinion. Maybe jump it up to 30 per turn, make this card actually be a good debuff card and not just completely worthless. I think that, and then there's other cards that give Robin Hood buffs already that could make this card a lot better, and this archetype in general a lot better. I would love to get Robin Hood, or whatever this archetype, I call it the Robin Hood archetype, but get that more playable. I just think right now it's not really playable, and I would love to see it. All right, next up, I want to touch on some cards that I think could benefit Oceans a lot. Oceans, I mean, it gets a little bit of play with the Cephalopod package and the Sharks, but that's really about it. And I think this could be a game-changing card if they tweaked it a little bit. So basically, I think the return effect where after it buffs everything +30 until played, I think when you play it and then immediately you lose it right back, 20. I don't really get why they did that. Feels kind of bad. So really you're only netting +10 until played on your cards. I think they should reduce that down. Instead of -20 until played, drop it down to -10 until played. So at least you're still getting a 20 until played buff on your cards. I think that would make this card see a lot more play. All right. Next up, I want to talk about a card that I am kind of surprised doesn't already see play. Iberian Lynx. This card wants to be good, and I think it really can be good. They just need to tweak some of the words here. So what I want to do is on the playability, it says this card, the card opposite this loses 30 this turn. Let's change it to loses 30 permanently. So now it slots in great on a debuff deck, kind of like Zoro does, where you're dinging somebody's power permanently. So that helps this card do a lot. Not only is it now a taxing card that dings your opponent's energy, so it could fit into a tax deck, it could fit into a debuff deck if it hit the minus 30 perm. And I want to change the return effect completely and change the return effect to basically say this card, or when returned, you gain 10 power per turn. So you'll get that where this can slot then into a power per turn deck, or like I said, a Scorched Earth deck where you're dinging your opponent's power, yet you're still gaining power per turn. I think that would be really fun with this card, and I think this card would see a lot of play because it would have 3 homes. You could slot it in a tax deck, you could slot it in a debuff deck, and you could slot it in a power per turn deck. And this card wouldn't just be a card that everybody looks at and goes, man, it seems like it wants to be good, but nobody plays it. So that's what I would do with that card. All right, that's it for my buffs, but I do want to talk about a new archetype that I want to create. And it's built around this card right here. The Sun. This card's so interesting, right? To me, 10 energy for 30 power. And you're only going to gain 2 permanent power. Or, I'm sorry, permanent energy. I want to make a deck that's like basically a Sun archetype, where this card is getting permanent buffs from all kinds of cards. So not only now are you going to get 2 permanent energy, but as the game goes on, this 10 drop that you're sitting on is going to be massive, kind of like a Sidonia or something. So what I'm proposing, so basically it's going to be a Sun deck. You're building cards that are given the Sun permanent power and already do other things, so it's kind of neat. So the first one up that I want to affect, obviously Carrington event is the Sun, right? So basically on this, add a return effect that just says the Sun card gains 50 permanent power. So now you got a card that's given 50 power to the Sun, making that thing a beast. Also thinking Rogue Planet. This card, in my opinion, is garbage right now. Like, literally, when drawn, a random card in your hand costs minus 2 perm. Okay, who's playing this card? Nobody. Doesn't do enough. It's a 6 drop for only 42 power. You're not getting anything out of it. So again, let's add a return effect on here that says, and then when returned, the Sun card gains, 40 or 50 permanent power. It doesn't even have to be that much. It could be 30. Doesn't matter. But again, triggering the Sun and just specific cards that you can buff up that are super weak right now, that could kind of, hit up that, make a new archetype, basically. I think that's what they need to do. This card right here, the Sun, it's a Sun God. It wants to do that. Look, read it. When drawn, this card loses 10 permanently, okay. And when played, the Sun card, wherever it is, gains 20 until played. They tried to do it. It's like they wanted to do what I'm saying with this archetype. But why wouldn't you just make it permanent? The card costs 10. Think of Godzilla. Godzilla's huge, but it's getting permanent power as the game goes on. Let's buff up the Sun. Yeah, it might start super low. You can even nerf the Sun down to 10 energy and make it 0 cost. Or, 0 power, base power. Then you just have all these other cards buffing it up as the game goes on. So switch this play effect to the Sun gains 25 permanent power on play. I think that'd be pretty cool. I've got a couple others here that I think would be good fits for it. Again, Aten, when played, if played next to the Sun, 14 of your random Egyptian mythology cards, wherever they are, gain plus 14 until played. So that's already kind of a cool ability, and it wants to have the Sun in the deck, so you can use it in a Sun deck, and then you'd have another avenue in which to build a Sun deck. You could use Egyptian mythology cards, which are hardly played with. Aside from Eye of Ra and Eye of Horus, everything else is pretty much never touched. So now you have an avenue in which to play into Egyptian mythology using the sun. So basically adding another return effect on this card that says, and the sun gains 25 permanent power. Make this card completely good. Probably too good, honestly. But God forbid we make actual archetypes that can be viable. We're just going to keep playing Statue of Liberty till we're blue in the face, I guess. Nope. You know how that is. It's just, 2 decks are viable. It's cool. All right, next up, Sundance. Again, perfect card for this. Sundance. When played, if you're losing the round, 3 random cards in your hand gain plus 24 this turn. Okay, not the greatest ability, but I can live with it. But let's add a draw effect that says the sun, wherever it is, gains 20 permanent power. Look at that. We just made a whole new archetype just like that. So easy. Playing around the sun. All right, guys, that's it for tonight. Hopefully you enjoyed the video and the buff ideas, the nerf ideas, some of the top cards that I think would be great for beginners. Let me know in the comments what you guys thought. As always, thanks for watching. Have a good night.